I love spooky things, and I have made a career out of loving spooky things.
Hi, I'm Kate Lachine, and that mysterious lady is my guest today, Leanna Renee Heber. You can learn more about her at leannareneeheber.com, and if you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe below. Let's get started. Leanna is an actress, playwright, ghost tour guide, and award-winning best-selling author. We met many years ago at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, and since then she has interwoven several different art forms into one cohesive artistic career and personal brand. Many artists find themselves developing multiple skill sets because of their diverse interests or to create more opportunities for themselves. And I thought Leanna would be the perfect person to chat about this with. Hey Leanna, thanks so much for doing this with me. It's really good to see you.
It is so good to see you, and I'm thrilled to be here.
So it's been many, many years since we met at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, and no one needs to know how long that was. But you were acting, and I'm also an actor, but I was actually assistant stage managing the shows you were in. And you know, that's a really common thing for artistic folks to have a secondary interest or discipline, either within theater or maybe a different, completely outside of theater. And so you have been incredibly successful at melding a bunch of different things into a very cohesive career. And so I thought you'd be a great person to talk to about this. So am I correct in that you started as an actor? That was your first sort of artistic foray?
Absolutely. The first love of my life really was writing and always has been. But the external thing that I pursued more publicly was theater. And so I was outwardly an actor and privately a writer ever since I was a kid. I didn't tend to share my writings too terribly much unless they were performative in nature. So sometimes, helpful teachers would encourage me. I was always encouraged with my writing and with performing and any artistic discipline, because early on, both my parents and all teachers could tell that I was an artistic kid, gonna go somewhere in the arts, not necessarily in sciences and certainly nowhere in math. So I think for me, it was pursuing the thing that was sort of the public face, which was theater. And so writing was just the secondary thing, but always, again, they were always entwined. So I got a theater degree at Miami University in Ohio and a BFA in their BFA program. It was a great program. It was a liberal arts college. And the great thing about that is that I love liberal arts education because it really is interdisciplinary. And I was able to explore a lot of my other interests within my degree. And one of those interests was basically getting, so known as a thematic sequence, but it's basically a minor in another discipline. And so I took that thematic sequence in the Victorian era, which was a time period that I'm particularly passionate about and also have been since I was a kid. So all of my childhood interests, all of the things that I was always really passionate about, I have taken with me and found a way here or there to weave them into professional circumstances and professional work. So we can talk a little bit about how that goes as we go.
So what tipped you into wanting to write professionally, or at least get your work out in front of people?
I'd mentioned I was always writing while I was doing theater. So theater was this public face and writing was this private face. But I had been writing all along throughout my professional acting career. And when I got my equity card and I moved to New York City, I moved to New York so that it could help me sort out which of the things was going to take precedence. Was it going to be theater or was it going to be publishing? Because New York City is also the heart of the publishing world as well as the theatrical world. So I was at a Broadway callback and all I could think about was my book. And that's kind of a place where if you're at a Broadway callback and you're thinking about anything else, go and do that other thing. So that really sort of showed me a stark reality of just how much this book meant to me and how disappointed I would be if I didn't throw weight behind it to try to get out in the world. So I actually stopped auditioning for a while and I just shifted career focus and started networking in writing circles and taking writing classes specific to the genre I was working in. And that really sped up the process. Within the next 2 years, I had my first professional book contract because I had shifted focus and renewed an investment in learning the things about that craft that I hadn't had time to do while I was learning my theater craft.
How did all this coalesce into this incredibly unique and interesting brand for yourself that includes some of the hardest things in the world to make a living at: writing, acting, you're a ghost tour guide, a playwright. All of those things are very hard. So how have you purposefully gotten all of this, or not purposefully gotten all this to coalesce together?
I honestly really think that it comes down to some of your earliest loves in life. I think that if one pursues some of their favorite things that have been their favorite things for a really long time, it doesn't seem as sort of far apart. I'm very interested in storytelling as a novelist and storytelling as an actor. They're two different kinds of storytelling, or as a playwright. But at the end of the day, really sort of the core of everything for me is really storytelling. So, and I'm very interested in spooky stuff. So storytelling and spooky stuff, these are the two key ingredients to my whole being. So ever since I was a kid, some of my earliest memories were of telling ghost stories that I made up to my Girl Scout troop and terrifying them. And in that, I found a great power. And I had an absolute blast. And I took a lot of delight in spooky things. So as a goth, I'm one of those, Nightmare Before Christmas goths, where we're a part of Halloween Town and we're kind of bouncing around happy. I'm one of those perky goths. So I think that, the just kind of dark interests have always really appealed to me, but not in a way that's particularly morbid, in a way that like, oh, look at that cool spider. Ooh, bats, so cute. So that's really, kind of my whole aesthetic, and it has been since I was a kid. I had a really great teacher when I was in grade school, who like passed me a volume of Edgar Allan Poe when I was young, and she was like, "You're weird, you'll like this," and and that really kind of set my course. I traveled with a volume, the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, with me as like a preteen for years. I was like inseparable from this. So I really, all of my interests, my first show in high school happened to be Poe's Midnight Dreary. It was a collection of all of Poe's short stories. I couldn't have planned that. It just happened, And so I went in, I was the only freshman who was cast in that show, because I went in and being like, I love Poe. So I think sometimes if you just really live your passions, sometimes they'll kind of come to you. And that was the case when I was doing theater too. Like I would always go and audition for the paranormal shows. I would go out of my way to make sure that I would audition for whoever was doing Dracula that season, because that's my favorite kind of thing to do. And my love of history ties right into this, because I really don't think that the Victorian era and the 19th century and ghosts are really inextricable. I think they're actually completely entwined. So my interest in specifically the 19th century, which was really touched off by A Christmas Carol, by Phantom of the Opera, by other kind of spooky 19th century tales, that era really spoke to me in a way that I can really only describe as past lives. So, which is another paranormal concept. So, the storytelling and spooky things are the through lines, and everything else has kind of come because I'm trying to pursue those things and have fun with them.
That makes a lot of sense. And so I guess that probably makes it fairly easy for you to decide, and tell me if I'm wrong, but to decide what projects to take on and what not to, because, you've been a very successful writer, award-winning, best-selling, you've got over 13 novels. And so I think, and you get to you're on panels and at different conferences and various things. So people are aware of you, and you probably get invited to do a lot of things, maybe invited to do different projects. So does that, taking your favorite things with you, does that also help you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to?
Absolutely. It has to kind of like, I think for me, even though being a tour guide might seem like it's a departure from these other things, it isn't when you think about I'm a ghost tour guide. All of my 13 novels all have ghosts in them. So ghosts are so much a part of my favorite things. B, like that kind of narrows the focus. I was a general tour guide in New York City for many years, and I did not enjoy it. So I kind of curated my professional experience down to my favorite things. It wasn't that I was always as an actor or always as a person with 5 freelance jobs, that I was always doing everything that felt tailor-made to me. That's really only happened in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, where I've been able to kind of cull down the things that were less me. When I was a general New York City tour guide, just about the whole city as a whole, I found myself really wanting to focus down on my favorite things and really just talk to people about the way the history of New York intersects with spectral history and ghost stories. So I really found that for me, honing as I went, that kind of speaks to that concept of how, what do you say yes to? The things that really focus in on your favorite things, if at all possible. But it wasn't possible for me to get the job as a ghost tour guide without having been a more general tour guide first.
Yeah, it's so interesting how different experiences we have either pave the way to get us back to our favorite things, or maybe show up once we're doing our favorite things again. And speaking of that, I was reading one of your novels the other day, The Spectral City, and very early in the novel, there are a couple of phrases that my little actor radar went up, and I was like, oh, Immortal Coil, and The Undiscovered Country, and I was like, Hamlet. There it is, you know. And you also made a delightful reference to Edwin Booth trying to get theater a more respectable reputation, which I laughed out loud at. But anyway, so, you know, I was really curious. You're so familiar with dramatic literature. How purposeful are you in bringing that into your own writing, or does it just kind of pop up because it's in your consciousness?
I'm very deliberate about trying to make as many theatrical references as I possibly can, because I am a performer and actress at heart, and I always will be. And I really want to honor that. You know, my training was all in theater, and I would, you know, pay a lot of attention during the playwriting classes I had in college, and in other craft classes that I took outside of school, you know, kind of curating my own continuing education as I went. But I was always, you know, the stage formed how I thought about storytelling. So, you know, it is just really exciting for me to also like drop tidbits of theater history too, because I think that when people read my work, they can tell that there's a bit of a performative theatrical flair to what I write. And so when I am direct with that about theatrical references, it really makes the voice feel unique and something that I really take a lot of pride in. And then also too, I'm often asked by my publicity team, by other folks in the industry, to do panels and things because they know I have a theatrical background. So my voice as a writer is very character driven, and that completely comes from my background as an actor. So I don't know where theater stops and writing begins, or where writing stops and theater begins. I actually have entwined both of those disciplines so deeply in me that they're just constantly informing each other. And so for me, some of the best phrases about big picture things come from Shakespeare, come from, you know, some of these classic literature moments. And so I think also too, the 19th century, they were ardent neoclassicists. So my books are all set in the late 19th century, and with folks who would be very familiar. Things were being staged all the time. That was their entertainment. That was their television. So folks were a little bit more involved with theater in those days than they are now, where there's a wealth of media beyond stage alone. So that for me also feels like a way to involve other art forms that were historically very much a part of these folks' lives as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. You mentioned something in a previous conversation we had that I want to get in here somehow. And I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about how, when you're feeling creatively stuck, how you use one art form to help you kind of unstick the other, and vice versa.
I think that if you're trying to take with you everything that's your favorite thing, so that's kind of been one of the things that I talk about most often, is try to take with you in your life your favorite things, because you never know when one of those things is going to come in handy. When I am stuck and I really don't feel like I know what to do about a scene in one of my novels, then I will shift into my playwriting brain and work on a one-person show, because I have a wealth of opportunity and interest and desire to have some of these underrepresented women in history take their stories and create one woman shows out of them. And so I've done this in a couple of different scenarios before. Most recently, playing Clara Driscoll. Clara Walcott Driscoll was a woman who designed all of Louis Comfort Tiffany stained glass lamps, and she was uncredited during her life, and she's only now within the last 10 years, starting to be credited for all the beautiful art that she actually designed. She was somebody I was researching for another book that I was writing, and I stumbled across her, and I just became entranced with her story. And that wasn't right for the novel I was working on, but I then compiled historical resources, took her letters, adapted them, and have made a one woman show out of it. So I'm always kind of culling material from one thing to the next. And if I stall on one thing, then I'll just shift over to something else so that I don't feel like I've failed one or the other thing. That's the hardest thing, really, is to not feel like you're failing one of your projects when you shift to the other. But honestly, sometimes you just need to take a break. And that for me feels like I'm not just shutting down and completely abandoning that creative process. It just means that I'm focusing on one of these other things. I also craft jewelry as well. So I have an Etsy shop. And so working with my hands is something that's really, really fun, which is very different from when I'm in my brain. So I have all these different ways in which things that are passions of mine become income streams, as well as ways to kind of shift, because this part of my brain and this part of my body sometimes need to be on different wavelengths. And so I don't want folks to feel like they have to monetize everything that they love. The economic climate is really, really tough, especially for younger people coming up. And so I feel like I don't want to say monetize all your passions. Not really what I'm saying, but shifting gears between your passions so that you're still working on something that you love, that whether you monetize that or not doesn't matter. What matters is not feeling like you have hit a wall and can't unstick yourself. Also, as a writer, I write non-linearly. So I don't write in a linear order. I write out of order. I'm a chaos theory artist in just about every capacity. So sometimes too, when I talk to other writers and talk to them about getting unstuck, is, look at a way to jump ahead in your narrative. And so maybe write out of order. If you already write out of order already and you're stuck, okay, well then just write something else that needs to happen in the book, or that needs to happen on stage, or that needs to happen in whatever other creative discipline that you're doing. You don't necessarily have to think about it in the what happens next. You can think about it in a way that's, I'm going to work on this that's going to become important later.
That's fantastic. Because I think creative blocks from whatever discipline is a pretty common problem. And so I think that's a fantastic answer to it. And I'm also curious, as a professional writer, you definitely have deadlines. And I'm curious if you have any advice to give for people who need to meet a deadline.
Be as understanding of your own process as possible. For me, I am chaos theory, and I have a healthy dose of procrastination. I love my deadlines because I need them, because they provide the necessary pressure. Time management is a tricky thing for those of us who are self-employed and who have multiple different freelance things, as I do, all of which I love and all of which I really enjoy, but all of which can get really overwhelming and really daunting sometimes. So honestly, I just try to take it day by day and do a few things. I try to have a to-do list, but I also try not to completely beat myself up if I haven't crossed everything off that to-do list. It's often just not possible. A lot of times that to-do list is aspirational. So be very real with what your process is and be understanding about it. Be as gentle as you can. Set rewards for yourself. Because I'm definitely like a treat-based creature. So if I know that there's a treat that's waiting for me, if I finish these things, I whatever it takes, honestly, and just kind of try not to take yourself too terribly seriously while you're doing it, because that also means you'll just have fun with all of it. And if you are exasperated with having gotten nothing done that week, well, then be exasperated with yourself, but in a way that's like, beat yourself with a rubber chicken, not like a brick.
So that actually segues really well into a little game of questions that I like to play at the end of interviews, if you're willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Great. So question number one, when your day, no matter how hectic it gets, what is one habit that you absolutely have to do?
Every day I have to be thinking about story. So I'm a storyteller, and that's the through line through everything that I do is storytelling. So I don't always have a chance to get down to sit down with my book and get word count done. But I can always be thinking about story. And as long as you're thinking about it, you're still working on it because you're percolating on it. So thinking about story, that's the thing I have to do every day.
How do you like to challenge yourself?
Including something in my books that I haven't written about before, but that I really love and I want to mention, especially. So I'll use the example of different paranormal circumstances. I hadn't yet included a seance in my work. And here I am talking about ghosts, and I'd yet to have a seance. So the Spectral City series honestly really centers around having lots of seances, because I love the concept of sitting around, holding hands with people, trying to commune with the spirit world. It's a very important part of 19th century spiritualism, both in terms of history and when you're talking about ghosts. So I basically, in challenging myself, I get a sort of, school kid excitement about what is something that I haven't talked about yet in one of my books or in one of my shows. Or honestly, the challenge is, let me find out about and let me immerse myself in something that I'm interested in that I haven't yet covered.
As a treat-based creature, what is your favorite non-food related treat?
Just spending time in nature. Whether it's going out for a walk, whether it's sitting and bird watching for a bit, being out with nature, planting a tree, planting a flower, those kinds of things for me are a wonderful treat. And even if I don't have time for it, I will still sometimes make time to spend a little time with some green things, because it's good for the psyche and tends to replenish the spirit.
I completely agree. Well, Leanna, this has been so much fun to talk to you. There are so many gems in this interview for folks who want to write, who want to act, who want to do anything creative. So I thank you so much for sharing your story and all your great advice and wisdom. And it's been lovely to talk to you today.
I am so passionate about these topics, and I love encouraging other artistic professionals in any kind of field. So keep being excited about all the things that you're doing. They'll all come in handy.